If anybody in media, we were talking about how so much goes on now that never ends when you cover college football, which makes it fun at the same time. You just want to decompress. Angelique Chengelis, the Detroit News. If anybody needs to be sent on a really nice get the hell away from everything vacation, it's her. Covering Michigan football, and of course today a lot on Jim Harbaugh leaving. Angelique, thank you very much. How close did Michigan get to try to keeping him before it just was too late?
I think they were close, but I think that they were just a little bit late. You know, he had certain contract demands, and they waited until the last minute, basically, to say, okay, you can have all these things, immunity from the NCAA. We already knew that they were going to make him the highest paid coach in college football. But it was just, by the time Michigan got back to them with that yesterday, his representative, he was already really, really far down the road in his negotiations with the Chargers. So at that point, he was not coming back. And, I think that they had a lot of chances, Michigan did, over the last few months to keep Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. And I think there's a big part of Jim that wants to stay or wanted to stay at Michigan. But there's also a big part of him that wants to try to win a Super Bowl. And everybody saw that the last few years. I mean, he went to Minnesota in 2022 for an interview, and he was in conversations with the Broncos last year. So the NFL flirtation is not new, but I do think that if they had met in the middle or closer to what he had wanted in his contract sooner, I think it might be a little bit different story right now.
Angelique, obviously Sherrone Moore is the favorite, and it looks like that's what they're going to do. And if that is the case and nobody kind of comes out of nowhere as the next Michigan head coach, did Jim Harbaugh's suspension kind of work out for them in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, he did have sort of an audition in a sense. He had 4 games, Sherrone Moore did, as acting head coach. I mean, Jim was suspended to 6 games, and those first 3 games he divvied up among his assistants. And Sherrone went 4-0, and he led the team to wins at Penn State and against Ohio State. And those were the enormous games on the schedule late to get Michigan the Big Ten East Division title and back in the championship game. So, he earned it on game days. Now, I mean, Jim Harbaugh was there doing the everyday duties those weeks. So, I think Sherrone's got a learning curve there in terms of understanding all the head coaching responsibilities and dealing with all the different layers that they have to deal with on game days. I mean, like he had expressed after which game it was about how much more, you have to talk to the officials, and he wasn't used to that. But those are small things. And, but yeah, I mean, I think he's extremely popular on the staff. He's extremely popular with the players. And he's a guy who essentially Jim Harbaugh kind of handpicked. And if Jim Harbaugh were back, I think it would be in Sherrone Moore's contract that he would be the coach in waiting. So I think this is sort of played out the way Harbaugh certainly foresaw things with Sherrone Moore.
What do you think happens with JJ McCarthy now at this point?
Well, I mean, he's preparing for the NFL draft, and it's going to be really interesting to see what Michigan does at quarterback. They've got some guys on the roster. Alex Orji is a guy that they used a lot preparing for Alabama for Jalen Milroe, and he's extremely athletic young man, and certainly could handle the job. I think that they'll wait until the portal in the spring and see if their quarterback's available. But it's going to be tough to replace JJ McCarthy. I mean, he had quite a record for these last 2 seasons and with a national championship on top. So there's a lot of holes on Michigan's offense for 2024. Defense looks like it'll be pretty good, but I don't think their defensive coordinator is going to be back. So they're going to have to find someone to replace Jesse Minter now as well.
You mentioned that they could have maybe worked faster on this. And again, Harbaugh has the NFL ties, and we understand what he did with the 49ers. Is there going to be any not blood, but is there going to be anything that Michigan fans will be upset about with Ward Manuel because they did not get this done?
Well, I think Michigan fans, the ones who are very angry about Jim leaving, are going to look for a villain in this. And I've said multiple times, Ward, I don't think Ward's the bad guy here. There are a lot of layers when you're talking about college football, and it's not just the athletic director who's working on contracts. There is, you've got the president involved, the regents are involved. You have a general counsel for the university who is, his job is to protect the university. And with two outstanding NCAA investigations, I think that's where he's coming from in terms of looking at contract language and what's permissible, what's acceptable, what do we have to slash here. So I think it's very easy to say, Ward, you blew it. And, Ward's not perfect. There's no doubt about it. And I think he'd admit to that. But I think he also likes to point out that in 2020, when he could have fired Jim Harbaugh after the 2-4 season, he didn't, and he brought him back and slashed his salary. So, I think that there's some blame to go around. And, but there's also Jim Harbaugh ultimately decided I think the NCAA pressures a lot. And, there's also a lot more pressures on college coaches, as we all know now with NIL and the portal. So I think that this is a win-win for Jim Harbaugh. And, he gets to try to win a Super Bowl now. He's got a situation with a good quarterback, and that's a good starting spot for him. Because, he was talking to Atlanta, too, and I think that might have been a place where he could have won quickly if he had a quarterback there. And I think ultimately that's why he chose to go to the Chargers.
Angelique, do you expect any of they're losing a ton of their starters. They're going to have a ton of guys drafted. So that it's not going to be a surprise, if they have a little bit of a step back. But do you expect, if Sherrone Moore's the coach, that any of the bigger name guys that they are expecting back would jump in the portal, or is that going to be pretty solid because, again, he is Jim Harbaugh's handpicked guy?
Yeah, I don't expect to see a lot of movement of players transfer. I mean, the portal's open now. I mean, as soon as Jim left, they have 30 days now for players who want to jump in the portal to do so. And, I just don't see it happening. I think that Sherrone is extremely popular. I mean, he's a younger guy. He's 37. I think people saw how emotional he got on that television interview after the Penn State game, where he used a little bit of, a few expletives and was crying. And so he wears his emotions on his sleeve, and the players respond to that. And I think right away you saw like Zach Zinner, who's not going to be back, but the right guard, he put on social media, no interviews needed. It's Sherrone's job. So I think that was also, when you look at Ward Manuel's statement Wednesday night, they want to move quickly because they want to preserve as much as they can on the staff and keep the team intact, because Sherrone's been a big part of the culture that's been built over these last few years.
Last thing, Angelique, have you ever been through a football season like this one?
No, and I hope I never do. And it's 9 seasons covering Jim Harbaugh has been very challenging. He's on a lot of different ways. He makes you ask really good questions, and he can be difficult. He can be charming. And but this season, with all the NCAA stuff, with the Connor Stallion stuff, I mean, it's I keep calling, and I won't be able to call it this anymore. But this is the last February I'll cover. January, is he going? What NFL teams? What's Jim Harbaugh doing today? So that's over. But then it's not going to end now. Now we got to see what happens with Sherrone Moore and the next steps with where Michigan football goes now.
You have been great throughout it, Angelique. Good luck covering the next part of this, the chapter of replacing him with Sherrone Moore, whatever else happens with that. Thank you so much, and get some sleep.
Oh, my pleasure. I hope I can. Thank you.
Angelique Chengelis, Detroit News, has done a great job, been with us, gave you a